So as you can see, this is what I'm going to talk about, Japanese martial arts books, an overview. I have to thank Six not only for inviting me to this conference, but also for giving me the task of handling this topic in 20 minutes. So I will go in medias res right away and beg for your understanding that I will merely outline the main points without going into detail, especially concerning the contents of the text itself. But I think you get a good example from the talk after me, where Michael Mattner is talking about one concrete book. So let's start. Regarding the situation of Japanese martial arts books, we can illustrate this as follows. That is to say, first of all, we have a large amount of Japanese text shown at the bottom. We have, secondly, a much smaller amount of translated text shown in the middle. And we have, thirdly, a really small number of text used by Western authors writing about Japanese martial arts. The rate between available and translated texts may not be so surprising at first, yet it is interesting, as we will see when we know more about the concrete number of texts we are talking about. But even more disputable is the rate between translated texts and the texts in use. That means that really the majority of Western writers, not seldom including Asia or Japan scholars, use only a handful of text when writing about Japanese martial arts. Though some probable reasons for that situation cannot be discussed here, I think it should be kept in mind. The next 3 slides show, as far as I know, a relevant difference in Japanese and Western basis for the topic of our conference. In Japan, we have a really nice collection of important texts on our topic, so modern collections, and I'm not sure if we have anything similar in Germany or England or the States. So here you see the Bushido Zensho, a collection of 11 books. I will go in some detail on these collections later. It's just for getting a visual picture of what I personally use. I don't use manuscripts, I use these reprints and these edited versions of texts. Here we have the Nihon Budo Taikei, a really great collection of texts. And here it is the Nihon Heihoshi, and unfortunately, this is my personal collection. There's missing the number 5, you see, but I think I will get it anytime. What follows now is for sure the really briefest summary of the history of Japan you've ever heard. It's only for those not familiar at all with Japanese history, to provide an extremely rough outline. All others, I beg to ignore all the shortcomings of this overview. We have the formative period of Japan, and it's remarkable maybe that we start really late. So we have here in China, India, ancient Greek, we have 1,000 years more to talk about. Of course, there is a history before that, but normally we say what developed into modern Japan starts about this time. Then we have the period of the classical aristocracy and the rise of the warrior class. Next, we have the consolidation of the warrior class. This is the famous Kamakura shogunate. Then we have the struggle of the warriors among each others, and it's printed in bold here because that is the first relevant period of our topic, mainly the texts. Then we have the famous Tokugawa or Edo period, the rule of the warriors in times of peace. Then we have the nationalistic empire, so here's an important difference to the history of China compared to China. So Japan got really quick from a feudal state to a modern state in really without any break, we could say. And we have the post-war Japan. And so we have 3 areas with really a lot of interesting texts and philosophies about fighting and philosophy. Yes. So. Now I will shortly give a provisional categorization of Japanese martial arts books. First point is we have classical Chinese martial arts text including Japanese commentaries. So in Japan we have from the beginning, we can say, of that what I told as the emerging of Japan, maybe in the 5th century, the Japanese adopted a lot of texts from China, and we even have Chinese texts that are not extant at China, but only in Japan. So, for example, here are the 7 classics of military that we have in Japan, including Sun Tzu. So Sun Tzu is one of really the most often commentated texts in Japan also. We have commentaries on Sun Tzu that make about 300 pages. And we have Taoist texts, we have texts on politics, we have texts on war. Really everything that was there in China was adopted, and not only once, but continuously. Then we have early Japanese martial arts texts. That is a very interesting category of texts because we are here about 1,000 after Christ, and these texts are often a mixture of Chinese ideas and magical ideas, magical thinking. So there are formulas for going into battle, what signs with your hand to do, what mantras, what formula to speak. We have early signs of battle formations. We have a lot of yin-yang and Wu-Jing philosophy inside these texts. That is so very interesting. We have the house rules that are texts from warriors, for warriors in their clan, that are treating how to behave in a correct way and what a warrior should do. And of course, oftenly there is mentioned that the warrior has to engage in training, to be prepared for battle, loyalty, and all these aspects are covered here. Then we have texts of renowned fighters called Meijin. One of the most famous is, of course, Miyamoto Musashi. Or traditions, Ryuha, for example, the famous Katori Shinto Ryu, a very old swordmanship tradition, or not only swordmanship, also other weapons in Japan. This is including lineage charts, Keifu, where it's written down from master to who is the master, who is the teacher in the next generation, in the next generation, in the next generation. We have registers, Mokuroku. These are often only catalogues of the names of the techniques. And we have licenses, Menkyo Kaiden, Inka Shomei. These are very small texts that gratify somebody or say somebody, yes, you have mastered the art, you are allowed to teach this art, this kind of texts. Then we have texts of more philosophical and Confucian content, Bunbusho. The majority of these texts is falling in the Edo or Tokugawa period, where the warriors where the warriors reigned the country, but they had not every day a battle. So they were warriors, some could say, that were no more longer needed. So what to do? They had to govern a country. They started reading more, they started studying more, and they started to get more intent on the idea to use the martial arts as a program to develop oneself. And it's also the time where the individual fight is getting of more importance. Before this time, we have, of course, a lot of mass battles where you can be as good as you want. It does not help if you get an arrow in the back or if you get shot down by a gun and all these things. So the individual fighting ship is starting in the Edo period under the really big paradigm of Bunbusho, the study of culture or civil arts and martial arts together. This paradigm is very old indeed, but it grows up, or it really gets to power in the Edo period. We have the text on espionage, that the famous ninja, and for example, the Banzen Shukai, one of the most famous ninja texts. There are a lot of difficulties in what differs, or what is a ninja other than a samurai with a special special education. These problems are not solved now, but the texts you can take them as one group of texts, and we have here, for example, also shown handlings for opening doors. We have plans of fortresses and all these things. We have a lot of talking about how to hide for an enemy, how to infiltrate the enemy. We have very interesting tactics, how you grow up people in a maybe foreign in a country where maybe be a war in 50 years or something like this. So there are a lot of things that are actual today also. And then after the Edo period, after 1868, we have the nationalistic, chauvinistic Bushido. I think it's really important to make a cut between the Edo period and the Meiji period if we are talking about or thinking at Japan. So most prominent sign of this is that in the Meiji area, the Tenno was put it as a sovereign again, and the Bushido ideology focuses on the Tenno as the big father of the country, and the Bushido, the way of the warrior, is now a way for everybody, so for the public to serve the Tenno and all these things, and that's very different from the Bunbu Ryodo, or from the martial arts of the Edo period. But of course, we have also in this time the evolution of, for example, Kendo and Judo, and these texts also belong to this. These are the texts of the founders of modern Budo. So Kano Jigoro, the founder of Judo, he wrote also something, or what he told was written down by his pupils. We have Ueshiba, who created the Aikido, and his pupils wrote down what he told them. We have Karate and Okinawa, that's also another big group of martial arts and texts. And then we have modern texts on techniques, philosophy, sport, and championship. So we see, and last we have war tales, chronicles, encyclopedias from ranging 1000 after Christ to now to the present. So we have really a lot of different topics and different kinds of martial arts books in Japan. What comes next are some very plain empirical data on easily available resources and obtainable translations into German and English. The Nihon Budo Taikei, you have seen the photo before, compendium of Japanese martial arts, so it's about 5,000 pages in 10 volumes on all topics, including swimming, firearms, espionage, but also throwing blades. The famous shuriken is only one kind of the throwing blades that were in use. We have also here gunnery firearms, so small gunnery and big gunnery. We have the staff, we have the naginata, we have nearly everything that has to do with Japanese martial arts, and there are included more than 250 shorter and longer documents. The Nihon Heiho Zenshu, you also saw this. This was the black books where is missing the number 5. The collection of Japanese military strategy. 3,400 pages in 7 volumes on 5 main and 8 minor schools of military strategy. This developed mostly also in the Edo period. So there were really a lot of teachers of martial arts and of strategy that were talking about how to build up groups, how to manage groups of soldiers. So we have here about 70 documents, longer documents. And example of one book, the Meiji Budoshi, Shiryo, historical or history of the martial arts in the Meiji era, materials, 900 pages with 21 longer texts. Included here are a lot of practical texts. That's fitting to the Bushido, to the time, because that was the time where the martial arts were adopted to make the people fit for service in military. So they had to work with kendo-like styles and wrestling to get prepared for the army. And so we have a lot of illustrations in these texts. And one last example, the Budo Kazenshu collection of martial arts poems. This is about 1,060 pages in 2 volumes and 140 documents. So these are 4 collections of texts, and there are much more that are not listed here. But I think you see there is a really good basis to go into the texts. Unfortunately, we have only about 40 longer and shorter translations in English and German. So we see here, if we put it together, 250, 70, 320. Let's say this is about 400 texts. And so about 40 translations would be 10% only. And it's always translated the same. That's also a problem, yes? So the Gorin no Sho, the Book of 5 Rings, is translated, and then it's again translated, and it's again translated, instead translating a new text. We have the Heiho Kadensho from Yakyu Munenori. We have the Tengu Geijutsuron. The Banzen Shukai is a new translation, so that's really fine. But it's not very much. Additional, we have anthologies and partial translations. For example, Ideals of the Samurai by William Scott Wilson or Training the Samurai Mind by Thomas Cleary were translated excerpts from a lot of different texts. So the quoted number of texts are not to be taken as precise data, not least because the length of the texts recorded is very diverse, ranging from half a page or even less to 50 pages or more. So one commentary to Sunzi from Yamagasoku is more than 150 pages, so this would be in a translation, maybe 300, 400 pages as a translation, maybe more. Sometimes it's only half a page. Nevertheless, it may be helpful to get a better grasp of the problem mentioned at the beginning concerning the texts that are available, the ones that are translated, and the ones that are in use. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, please.
So these compilations, were they ordered by somebody to make? How did such a monumental task?
For example, this one, the Bushido Sensho, was compiled by a Japanese intellectual at the middle of the 20th century. And this one was compiled by a research group. So I think the difference may be that in Japan, the martial arts are continuously much more integrated in the self-picture of the Japanese, and there's a university dealing really with martial arts topics, and so I think this is the background why they have so nice compilations of texts. So.
martial things, martial subjects. Which part of it is actually like the one Bob showed earlier, which is just, well, about techniques, about teaching, or about, inscription, description, codification, stuff like that. So how's the ratio between texts on military or strategy, stuff like that, and on techniques?
So the Nihon Budo Taikei is really primarily with individual schools and texts and techniques. So really a lot of documents from the single schools, from the Katori Shinto-ryu, from the Kashima Shinryu, and so on. From I think only the first three are swordmanship. So we have about 1,500 pages on swordmanship with about 30, 40 traditions, and of every tradition are integrated here all kinds of texts, so transmission lines, but also texts really dealing with the technique. So Miyamoto Musashi is integrated in this, and the text Michael Mattner is talking about is integrated in this. So this is not a single technique. This collection is really military matters in a big scale. Yeah.
If I could just follow up, and what about keeping it a secret? So I know I just met one scholar of one master actually of Japanese swordsmanship, and I was like, well, I'm researching this stuff in Europe, so let's just sit down and talk about it. He was like, no, I can't tell you because it's a secret. I can't teach you if you're not my student. So what about, how did they get these texts? How were they allowed to publish it? What about, are there many more texts that are kept a secret by the schools which are still existent? So
yes, so first point is there are much more texts. This what I talked about now is really what is easy accessible. So especially in times of Amazon Japan and something like this, yeah, so that's really great. But there are much more texts that really belong only to the school. Of course, there are texts integrated that have been secret, but I think that came under what circumstances ever to public. Somebody sold or lost or died, and yes. But there are much more texts, and there are also texts that will be kept in the Ryuha, in the tradition.
You mentioned kind of Chinese martial arts texts that were adopted. Did you have any? Have you ever seen references to Indian martial arts texts being referenced in Japan?
That's an interesting topic because I thought about this recently, but not very much. So we have what we can find is a Indian Buddhism hints something like this, but not really to Indian martial arts or battle texts. Not as far as I know. So.
One last question, if there's one more. Otherwise I have to say you did this perfectly in 20 minutes. And it was my fault. I apologize, because coming from mostly dealing with the European manuals, I thought that you could give us a list where there's like 20 books and that's it. But the amount is dependent.
I can give a list of 20 collections.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that.